Hi everybody, welcome to our next webinar on working together anywhere as part of our series that we're running. Today we're really going to focus on the well-being of people working from home. So as part of this, I just want to say we've got a Q&A panel box. If you can submit any questions, it's on the right hand side of your page. If you've got any problems accessing that, just put something in the chat box and we'll get to you. If you have any questions going through, pop them in and we'll do probably 10-15 minutes of Q&A at the end. So what we're going to cover today, it's very much around the working from home well-being. We're going to go through some really quick, nice wins tips that hopefully everybody can relate to and take away with them today. And also what the employer can do for remote workers. So if you are managing people or leaders of companies, you can also take some of these tips, not just for yourself, but also how to help your teams. And we're also going to just share a little bit of insight around what our customers are saying as well. We're obviously 12, 13 weeks into this working from home now. So I think it's crucial to say that even Rico ourselves, we had many people that were used to working from home for some of their roles. And then we had lots of people that also weren't working from home for some of their roles as well. So everybody is trying to get used to this, and it's obviously not a normal working from home situation. We are in the middle of a pandemic, and obviously people have also got kids that are at home and partners. It's not a normal environment. So we are relating to some of these challenges, and hopefully we can support you on some of these challenges today. It's safe to say that when the pandemic hit, we all obviously had to react very quickly to get people working from home. It was a very fast transition, lots of uncertainty. And ultimately it was how can we get people working from home very quickly. I think is what we're seeing now, 12, 13 weeks in, is this rise of now conversations around well-being and people working from home. Because I think, people are starting to get the cabin fever. We're starting to realise the, potentially we've formed some bad habits over the last 13 weeks. So hopefully we can tackle some of them today. We've got 4 of us on the panel today, and I'm going to hand over to Peter Brogan, who is our lovely host.
Thank you, Simone. And being called lovely is always a great start to a webinar. So from that point of view, so firstly to our audience, hope you're keeping well and safe. Obviously been a difficult last few weeks for everyone for this social experiment of working from home. So Simone mentioned there, I'm Peter Brogan. I'm Head of Research and Insight at the Institute of Facilities and Workplace and Facilities Management. So just a quite slight tweak on the slide. From that point of view, we've got a great lineup of panelists today, as you can see on your screen there. But as Simone mentioned already, I would really encourage you to use the Q&A because we're trying to make this as interactive as possible. So starting with this, I appreciate some of our audience have probably been on many webinars where a host will go through an individual's bio, and before you know it, you're 25 minutes into a webinar. So slightly different, as you can see on the slide there. We've got Simone Fenton-Jarvis, who's kicked off today, director from Rico UK, Annie Hood, Well Intelligence, and also Kirsty Angara from the Travelling Ergonomist. So from that point of view, I'm going to kick off with Simone. Just if we were in a lift or elevator, without sounding all cheesy, because I know we've experienced being in a lift and elevator together, but for our audience, just 3 minutes, a little bit about your backgrounds and also what brings and connects you to the subject we're talking about, well-being. So I'm going to ask all the panelists that, but unfortunately or fortunately, Simone, you're up first because I'm going to go along as we see each other on the slides. So Simone, if you can kick off on that. I think it's a nice introduction to the audience about the background and how you're connected to this subject.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So, my background is in facilities management. So I started by working in leisure centres, and I think, obviously from doing FM in leisure centres, it led to the obvious things of doing things like personal training, nutrition, exercise classes. Alongside that, my first kind of degree was in PE. So I've always kind of been quite health and physical kind of fitness focused as well as my own kind of well-being. And I guess the bit why I'm here today talking about the wellbeing is I've been managing people for 13 years. So throughout that time, I've had lots of experience of people's individual challenges, organisational challenges, in line with the new world as well. So hopefully that's a little bit of a helpful insight there.
No, that's great, Simone. So moving down the list, and I know, Annie, we had a few tech problems, so hopefully your heart rate's gone back to normal. It's almost great to panic a speaker before the event, but we've kindly got you on board. So, Annie, if you could kindly do the same, bit of background about yourself and how you connected to the subject of well-being, be great.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Peter. Thanks very much. Well, good morning, everybody. For me, my background began in hospitality. So I was wrapped up in food and beverage for many, many years, and then I transitioned into more predominantly well-being work in 2000. So that was managing gyms, spas, nutrition centres at the time, and worked internationally for a lot of those years too. I set up my own business in 2010, which was a wellness community, Kiss Lifestyle. It's still around. Consultancy followed. And Well Intelligence was formed 3 years ago to really give more profundity, if I can say that, to the importance of well-being in business, in people's lives, and also across society from a government perspective. So our mission really is to revolutionise the way human well-being is seen in the workplace, at home for individuals, and across government.
No, that's great, Annie. And as you can already tell from our first two panelists, there's a range of experience there. So I would encourage the Q&A function, as they want to get interactive. Last but not least, and as I said, I did it on the order of the slides. So Kirsty, you've already informed me about my posture as I'm looking at my webcam. So thank you for that. But same, you know the drill. Bit of background about your dear self and how you're actually connected to the subject would be great.
Yeah, sorry there, Peter. Old habits die hard, I'm afraid. Whenever I see bad posture, it just is an automatic response. My name is Kirsty Angra. I'm otherwise known as the travelling ergonomist. So I guess I have been very fortunate to travel the world since a child. So I was born in Mauritius. I have lived in Germany, the UK, and most recently Australia, and have with my business and with work been able to travel a lot of the world. So I guess my passion has always remained with people and how people connect with each other. And through that, I then studied ergonomics and human factors at Loughborough University because I have a sincere passion for the way we design environments and things and products and how that impacts people, their physical health and their mental well-being as well. So I've now been in the ergonomics industry for 10 years, started my business, The Travelling Ergonomist, 2.5 years ago now. And really, the heart of the business is to share content that really elevates how ergonomics can impact people in the workplace and make sure that we're looking after people's posture, their physical well-being, but also how we can design issues out. So that's the whole premise of ergonomics, designing issues out so that we don't have to deal with musculoskeletal disorders, we don't have to deal with poor design and poor designed products. We can walk into an environment and feel very comfortable, healthy, and productive as well.
No, that's great, Kirsty. And unfortunately, there's still many companies that still were trying to address that. And as you say, some people trying to address that even from their working from home practice, like my dear self. So that's our panelists for today. So from that point of view, you can see we've got a range of skills and experience around the subject matter. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, if that's okay. And Simone, I think this a little bit from a Rico perspective around some of the customer insights that you've received.
Yeah, hi everyone again. I mean, over the last few weeks, we've been doing roundtables with clusters of customers. So we're on probably 5 or 6 roundtables now. So we spoke to around 30, 40 individual companies, as well as our kind of standard meetings we're having throughout the week as well. And during all of this, we've been collecting their feedback around the challenges at the moment of the situation. And what the return, if there is going to be a return to the office or to the workplace, looks like. So from that, the majority of people are saying that they will start to return people back to the office in July. which I guess there's very mixed opinions on this. You can see many companies that are looking at actually January 2021, but there are people that are kind of dripping back into companies from July. But I think, looking at probably 20 to 30% occupancy for the initial few months until we get a little bit more settled in the situation. We've then got, we started asking to people, when you're going back to work, how comfortable are you with, how comfortable are your people with that return to work? The feedback as a whole is that people are not quite comfortable to travel yet. I do think that's regional. So obviously where people are getting the tube and things, people are not comfortable to do that yet. But where people can walk to work, people are saying that they are happy to start heading into the office if they can walk. We then started asking, how prepared are your organisations for that return? And as a whole, organisations do feel prepared for the return. And I think crucially within that is, how can you support the social distancing within your workplace? And many organisations are saying that they're happy with the social distancing aspect of that returning back to the workplace. But when you start looking at, how is that being done, 80% of the people we spoke to said that they will use technology in their return to work strategy. So I think obviously that's a really interesting concept, because, I'm sure we've seen many of the posts on LinkedIn all around perspex screens and tape and masks. And actually, how can we look a little bit bigger than that? And, I'll talk a little bit later on, but there's a clear difference between people being safe and people feeling safe, and I think that's what we'll cover as we move through these slides as well.
Annie, Kirsty, if I can bring you in there, sorry, about from your experience with your clients, is that resonating in terms of when they're returning to work? And I think in some quarters, particularly around the real estate and facility management side, that the return to work phrase has been a little bit frowned upon because some people never actually left work. So are we purely talking about returning to the office? So I just wondered, from your experience, how your clients are facing the issue of that return to work or return to the office.
Well, I think there's a real polarity on it, and it's being put into two camps of reborners and cocooners. And the reborners are the people that are desperate to just get back at it. They want to be back in an environment, a bit of a devil may care, sort of attitude of what's all this about? I just want to get back to a new semblance of normal. But the cocooners are those folks that are a little more anxious, and they are. Oh, can you hear me?
Still can hear you. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. They're a little more anxious about coming back to the office, even going out of their homes. So what I'm seeing is a polarity. So everyone's either gung-ho, or most people are gung-ho to get back, or they really want to be more cautious. They've got used to a way of working at home. They've got new habits that they're feeling very comfortable with. Perhaps that simplicity is really appealing to them. So in my mind, there needs to be a couple of narratives that appreciate where people are on that sort of ladder of moving forward.
And I guess, Kirsty, with your international focus on your clients, is that the same feeling not only in UK shores, but some of your global clients?
Yes, absolutely. I would echo what Annie said there. I think it really depends on, as well, the type of situation you were in before the pandemic and your general mindset then, because that will ultimately be a sort of similar mindset to you going forward as well. I think it's difficult to change that. So however you felt before the pandemic will certainly drive how you feel coming out of it. I feel certainly we can start to change that with education and training. As we bring people back to the workplace, of course, we need to look after their safety and their comfort and health. But ultimately, the government guidance is still to remain at home as much as we can. So we do need to continue making home workers a priority, as well as getting people back to the workforce or the workplace. So it is this balancing act between making sure the anxiety levels are managed throughout the business and to those who are coming back to the workplace and staying at home also.
I think as well.
No, that's great. And Simone, sorry, bring you back in. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it ties into that wider question, doesn't it, of what is the building, the office, the workplace for? Because if we can start cracking that, then we can start breaking potential bad habits where people are heading into workplaces because maybe presenteeism, maybe it's a lack of trust in the organisation. But then, some people do just like working in an office. They like to be around the buzz of the other people. They like to have that structure in the day. And I think the crucial bit here is, and anybody that's on my LinkedIn might have saw my post last night, which was a little bit maybe facetious, but ultimately we're not asking, is it custard or ice cream? We don't have to choose here. It should be a case of whatever task you're doing and how you wake up in the morning, you ultimately should be deciding how you're working and where you're working. This isn't about let's just stick a Monday to Friday 9 to 5, because there's so many people in the company and in companies that just aren't working Monday to Friday 9 to 5. And if that's how the world worked, then we probably wouldn't be very efficient. So it's a case of let's kind of start now breaking potential habits. And I think going on to that, what are the challenges right now? And a lot of these tie back straight into well-being, because when it's looking at public transport, it's not the public transport that's a challenge, it's the feeling safe on the public transport. You've then got, how do we keep buildings operational? What are people's mental health like? Zoom fatigue, we're all staring at screens. Are we taking enough breaks? And we'll get onto that. And I think, ultimately it's about what do we know right now? What do we know that we don't know? And ultimately, what things do we not even know that we don't know? And I think that's where we need to start, looking a little bit deeper of what is the situation right now. We know right now that people from a mental health point of view, we knew that before the pandemic, 1 in 4 were having troubles with mental health. So actually, what is that figure now and what will it be in the future? We know that from a financial point of view, many people are struggling. We know that ultimately people are potentially feeling quite isolated and lonely in this as well. We already had a percentage of 5% of UK adults that felt lonely. And actually, I can't imagine how the people feel of 13 weeks in lockdown living alone. And I think, that is going to be quite crucial. What is the impact of that going forward? And then as we kind of head into what are the things that we know we don't know? We don't know how productive people are working from home at the moment. We don't know what that level, that benchmark should be. If we're talking about output over input, that is a very wide conversation that kind of needs cracking on an individual company level. It's not something that we can kind of one size fits all. What do you expect from your people, and what is the environment like for them to work the most efficiently that they can? I think, Annie, Kirsty, if you get any points on that, is there anything that resonates there specifically with you guys?
Well, one thing I'd add to that is some research I've seen by Euromonitor, and it asked the question, what does healthy mean to you? And it was from the perspective of how much wellness is upping in a DIY sense, because so many people are working from home. And what topped the list was mental health, feeling better, whatever that means to everybody, and sleep, getting a decent amount of sleep. And I think to your point, Simone, in that, what makes people feel better, and if the workplace is a lovely, nurturing hub that really lifts you, you can imagine people, really, really missing that and wanting to get back to it. And of course, also the opposite. People just want to feel better in the simplest expression of well-being.
Yeah. I think the crucial thing to take out of this is that this isn't normal remote working. This was, overnight we all had to kind of pack up and head home and work from home where we possibly could. There's obviously many people that are still working. There's many people that are stuck at home homeschooling. So I think it's really crucial to remember that this isn't a true measure of how effective remote working can actually be. Annie, I mean, this is I guess over to you, because you had some really good points on this.
Well, I mean, it's something. I was coining something a couple of years ago for, what the future of well-being means. And for us, the future of well-being will be led and driven by tech, but defined by us, defined by humanity. And that's really taken on a life of its own more recently, because gosh, where would we be without tech? I mean, I might have been cursing it half an hour ago, but for the most part, everyone is so grateful for it, and that is going to increase. Biometrics are going to step up radically in terms of measuring our own, whether it's physiological, mental, emotional well-being, and that's going to creep into play, I'm quite sure, from a government perspective, across regions of the world to less and more degrees. But we must see technology as an advantage to us.
Yeah. And like you said about the government, it ties directly into that wider picture of, what's going to be enforced in the future, doesn't it?
Oh, God. I mean, absolutely.
So the legislation's an interesting point, Annie, as we move on to the slide. And I think it'd be good just for the audience to expand upon some of these points, bearing in mind time. But are these particularly the major ones that have happened and the future ones that you can see?
Yeah, they have. I mean, the 4 points above, the sugar tax, ban on fast food advertising, air pollution, mental health first aiders, they've already, mental health first aid was the beginning of this year, and with the circumstances we're in, I'd have to double check on what's happening there. But I think moving forward, if I skip, again, conscious of time, to that last point on conscious capitalism and impact investing, that's something that's set to come in towards the end of this year. And what it is regulations that govern how investment money is being spent, what the output is of it. And what impact investment means is that investment has to benefit positively humanity and the planet. And, that is expected to come into play later this year or the beginning of next year. And it's even more profound now because of the pandemic that we're in.
So this wheel of well-being that we move on to the next slide, and I think the legislation is going to be interesting to see the post-COVID-19 result of well-being and what's happening there. I see I've jumped back a few slides, so apologies for that. The wheel of well-being, I guess, Kirsty, if I can bring you on, is there any points on there that really resonate with your work and particular clients as well? Around the wheel of well-being?
Yeah, I think Simone and I have had this conversation quite a lot, and it's around the DSE regulations and what the Health and Safety Executive have announced with regards to that as we've moved to this temporary home working scenario. And they've suggested that employers don't need to conduct a DSE assessment whilst people are at home. From an ergonomics perspective, I think that's sort of a ridiculous statement because the risk factors of people coming home have increased exponentially. We don't have the appropriate space. Lots of people are sharing their homes with housemates, family members. So the lack of space is an issue. The lack of good equipment is also an issue. And certainly after even just 1 or 2 weeks, we might start to see people suffer with musculoskeletal disorders. Certainly now after 12 weeks, that's going to be a bigger issue. And it's anecdotally what I'm seeing when I'm doing remote assessments at the moment. So I think we do have a duty of care as businesses to look after our staff because ultimately we don't want our people coming back to the workplace feeling worse than when they left. That's not the point here. The point is that we help people rejuvenate, we help people understand their bodies from a physical and mental perspective so that when they do come back to the office, if they feel that they want to or need to, they're in a better position overall with their well-being.
No, that's great. And I guess if I can ask the panel, and I don't know who wants to come up first, on the screen our audience can see a lovely visual wheel, and we all like visuals, but not without a spoiler alert. We've got some lovely visuals coming later in the presentation. But I don't know who wants to kick off. For me, if I well, not simplify it, because it's not simple, it's not easy, or maybe it is. Maybe I've just contradicted myself. But Annie, around spiritual and some of those points that the audience can see, I would love to know personally what's meant by spiritual, because I think it's one aspect that's not necessarily overlooked, but one from maybe big corporate world or the corporate world that many of us work in, that is one that isn't really heavily discussed.
Well, it's really about connection, and that connection can be with yourself, with the wider ethereal world. We'll call it universal energy, if you will, for now. And really, it's about stillness, if I can simplify it, if you will, to that. And what perhaps a lot of people might have found, through this lockdown period, particularly if you're living alone, is that that silence is deafening sort of scenario, which might have been advantageous to some, but an absolute nightmare to others. And what lockdown has done, in a way, is given us the gift of time, for a lot of people, and those on furlough and not working from home, but actually stepping back from things. It gives them a chance to connect with themselves. And how do you do that? Well, you could do it through meditation, yoga practice, breath work. And what it gives a sense of is a bit of an ability to clear the mind and just be at one with oneself. And more widely than that, a sort of energetic connection. Spirituality has a sense of energy about it, and I'll put that into perspective in terms of when I talk about energy, we all feel negative and positive energies depending on who we're with or what's going on in our lives. And spirituality is about recognizing that we have everything we need within ourselves. And it's a very important part of mental health and being able to move forward, particularly in these times.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Simone, how does that resonate within the world of RICO in terms of, I made that slant about the big corporate world and spiritual, but I just wondered how RICO's, from a working from home wellbeing perspective, how it's tackled those aspects on the wheel, and maybe not tackle all of them, but some that resonate with your dear self would be great.
Yeah. I think is what we're doing internally, and I guess what we're doing externally with customers we can move on later to, but internally, our HR and wellbeing teams are making sure that managers are checking in on people ultimately and having them conversations, asking things like, how's your sleep? Are you managing to take breaks? Are you getting outside? And I think is what we're trying to do here is just kind of keep making sure that people are aware that, we're not expecting people to be robots here. We are people working at home. And it's, again, working at home and working at home during a pandemic, they're two very different situations. And I think what we're trying to do here is give people a bit of a permission to give, themselves a little bit of self-compassion ultimately, because, don't be so hard on yourself if you're not feeling as productive. But actually, here are the things that we can, support you with to be more productive. And I think simple things like, you go back to hydration, and 1% drop in hydration affects your productivity by 12%. And I think it's just reminding people of them kind of things. And we've done plenty of pulse surveys. How are people feeling? We've also got a wellbeing hub on our intranet that has got lots of top tips on, some videos, and I think there's also some online courses as well that you can take around that wellbeing and looking after yourself. And things like DSE assessments, making sure that from an ergonomics point of view, people are sat right at home.
And Kirsty, I guess from your point of view, how from a consultant's point of view, you've been tackling this. Obviously, you've probably got your clients and fellow experts to speak to, but I'm just interested. It can be a lonely world at the best of times because loneliness has been on the rise. I just wondered from your perspective how over the last 10 to 11 weeks, from your perspective, you've been coping with aspects of this, Will, and how you've seen it with your clients as well?
I think from a personal perspective, I made the choice to start my own business. So with that came working from home alone, I guess. So because I was able to make that choice myself, that mindset made it feel like this was a good choice for me based on my lifestyle and things like that. If I had been forced to move back to the home working space, then that might be a different situation. I might think about it differently. But for me, personally, because I had the ultimate choice as to where I work, I like what I'm doing right now, and I like working from home because I had the choice. But if other people are forced to work from home because of this pandemic now and haven't before and don't particularly want to or would have wanted to, then yeah, that's a difficult situation to be in. When it comes to my clients, we're trying to work those nuances out. And as part of the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors, we've brought out a guidance to support businesses on that return to the workplace, including mental health and psychological well-being, home working, and video etiquette. Much like what we're doing now, there has to be some etiquette around it because we can't read people's cues as well. There's maybe some lag on the video and we have to stop and wait. Is it my turn to speak yet? And things like that. And that, as Simone was mentioning earlier, that fatigue of video conferencing is a real thing because we can't read the cues as easily as we would if we were in person with someone else. So it's about managing all of that. And, with my clients, I'm making sure that people at home are set up well with the right products, the right tools, and educated. It's all well and good having the best tools and best products, but if you actually don't know how to use them, then you've wasted a lot of money at that point.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, Kirsty. And we're moving on. Yes, go on, Simone. I guess, Simone, I'll bring you in there. We've got the how to support your employees. I didn't know if we could move on to possible solutions. I know this might not be the whole solution, but is there any thoughts on the slide that our audience can view there, just to expand upon some of those points?
Yeah, I think the solutions there is you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And I think ultimately we all have to take responsibility for our own well-being. It's up to us whether we take breaks. I think where the employer kind of comes in here is we need to create this culture that is making sure it's people-centric and people are looking after themselves. We've seen a rise of agile guilt. So this feeling that because you're working from home, you need to always be turned on to technology, you need to be always available on your phone or on your Teams or whatever it is that you're working on, because when you miss a call and you ring somebody back and go, "Oh, sorry, I was just having my lunch," people are feeling guilty about simply having lunch. And we've seen the rise in the stats that are coming out from the government of how many people are actually skipping lunch, not even going outside during daylight. These things where this is where the culture of the company needs to, support people in that, be very that people-centric, keep in touch with people, create that culture of the trust and the freedom. Ultimately showing that duty of care to people. I think from a human level, you on the right-hand side here, you can see this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think, like always, we as human beings, we've got needs. And I think the simple elements of connection, when I ask people, what are you missing at the moment about office working, or what you're not missing, the things that people are coming through is, they feel a level of gratitude of the new world, because it means that they can have breakfast with the kids, they can have an evening meal with them, they're not having to commute. And I think it's these things that we need to remember going forward and, take advantage of now. Well, we can do that for those that can. But ultimately, as a human being, how are our needs being met? So, from a safety point of view, you could go into that on so many levels, but from that esteem and that love and belonging bit, we're missing out on them elements of walking to a meeting room with a teammate and having a little bit of a chat and catching up with them, because we're on back-to-back meetings that end and then you turn on to the next meeting. So we're not having that 5 minutes of downtime to build them kind of connections and relationships. And
Annie, I know Simone's mentioned there about culture. Is there how are you finding with that clients? Is there a shift that this is going to be higher up the agenda of boards? Because no matter all the research you can do, the years have said a happy worker is a productive worker. Now, I've oversimplified it, but predominantly the scientific research has proved that over the years. So I guess from your point of view, do you think this pandemic will shift this as more higher on the agenda? I'm not implying it never was, but is there going to be a shift in this culture across, not necessarily your clients, but if we talk about a UK for now, do you honestly think that's going to happen?
Unquestionably. I mean, it's already happening. So my message to those watching, particularly employers, is you've got to get ahead, because if you don't get on the front foot now, you're really going to get behind. And let me give you a couple of examples. I'm not going to name names, but some of my clients who I've been speaking to about embracing well-being within their organisation through culture, through philosophy, through end-to-end well-being policy. I can tell you a bit more about that if we have time. But where they were putting toes in the water maybe 4 months ago, now it's a case of, okay, we realise we really, need to accelerate the things that we've been talking about. So that is being recognised by senior people in large companies. Secondly, though, and this is perhaps the most compelling, is that companies are being called out. So on social media, we're seeing companies being called out who are paying lip service to something that they think they should be talking about and washing over it. But something comes out in the press about what they're doing, and they're being boycotted. And again, I don't really want to name and shame, but it's out there, and so companies need to be dial up integrity, dial up those true philosophies within what they're doing, because this is a global proposition, and people want to feel a sense of nurture, a sense of honesty and truth and liberation, in terms of what Simone was saying just a moment ago, not feeling like they've got to be anchored to their laptop. So, in short, yes, it's most definitely changing. And, to be successful, to be successful, one has to be embracing that now, so that as we get back to a new normality, we're on the front foot.
And I guess on the visual of the tech, and we touched upon that earlier, and I remember a poor radio poll, no, I won't name the radio station, basically asked about in the morning, do you turn to your smartphone first or your partner? And it was quite scary, the amount of people that turned to their smartphone first. So, Kirsty, I know this is one of your visuals you kindly provided, and it wasn't the point about this radio poll, but my point was about this dependency on smartphones and how that has affected mental health and well-being. There's no doubt about it in terms of more scientific studies than a radio poll has proven. But I just wondered your viewpoint around the overuse of this and the actual damage we are actually doing to our bodies, let alone our minds, by the overuse on smartphones.
Yeah, absolutely. As we have transitioned to working from home more permanently, at least for a temporary time period, we are using our devices more regularly and doing that in poor postures. It not only will affect your physical health in terms of your posture, but it will affect the eyes. Eye strain and digital eye strain has gone on the up since we've been working from home, because we are looking at a screen for much longer. We no longer have this commute where we might have ordinarily listened to music, a podcast, or relaxed. We now are looking at a screen, texting, navigating work, or whatever that might look like. So I think certainly what I'm trying to advise my clients is, when you are using your phone, before you go into that habit of just picking it up. I certainly, do it from time to time. You just end up picking up the phone out of habit. And really, I was probably going to scroll Instagram for no reason other than just to be nosy. I wasn't really doing anything productive. So before you pick up the phone, take 2 deep breaths so that you calm yourself down and think, what am I actually picking this phone up for? Is it to answer a phone call? Then yes, of course you need to do that. But was I just picking up the phone to mindlessly kind of scroll on something that really isn't necessary for that time period. And then just thinking about your posture as well. A lot of us bend our heads forward when looking at our phones, so trying to keep that phone at a more eye-level position is really important. And try not to hold it by using the weight of the phone with your pinky finger, because that can add a lot of strain and stress on your hand and your wrist, which is certainly not what I want people to be in at all. So I think we have to be more mindful of the way we're using our phones in terms of the posture and what we're actually doing on the phone as well. I've had to change my habits, because I'm typically one of those people who uses my phone until midnight and then wakes up picking up the phone at 6 a.m. So I put my phone now to the other side of my bedroom, plug it in there. So if it goes off, I have to physically get up and go to the phone.
No, yeah, it's a dependency, but it's the way we're working. So I think we could go into a separate debate the pros and cons of technology. So we've got an image there that looks like, I don't know, I might be wrong. Is that a good setup? But possibly yes or no. But I know one of the difficulties that a lot of people through this enforced working from home experiment is the fact that they don't have separate rooms. Some of this is done on a dining table that they share in a shared house with 4 other colleagues. Some people are still living with mum and dad of a particular age, and that's the social demographic within the UK. So I just wondered, for any of our other panelists, is that how has the companies or clients, respectively, for Annie's viewpoint, have supported staff for this working from home? Because I think it might drop a seed with certain companies that actually, do we need staff in 5 days a week? Is presentism really needed? Because real estate and people cost money. So actually, is there going to be a shift that actually employers will be providing such a service as we see on the screen there? I know some may be doing it already, but I know it's not the norm. But is this the new normal, that the phrase is coined across the media that employers and organisations respectively have to wake up to? So Annie, is there any thoughts from you on this?
Well, my own feel is that most people haven't stepped into that yet. Nobody really knew how long lockdown was going to go on for, and I think initially people thought maybe just a few weeks. I think some forward-thinking companies are doing that, but I think that wave of equipping everybody, properly at home is still to come. If I may, Peter, can I skip back to what you were saying about that great example about turning to your iPhone or turning to your partner? Top tip. Leave your phones downstairs. Don't have them anywhere near the bedroom. Buy, after this webinar, a little clock. They cost about £6 from Amazon. It's got a little battery in it, a little light, and just keep your phones completely separate. We haven't got on to sleep, but it's, that phones, it's not just about turning to it. It's about the EMF, that electromagnetic fields that come off the phone whilst you're sleeping. Keep your bedrooms technology-free for a decent night's sleep. So leave it downstairs, get that clock. Brilliant. It will change the quality of your sleep literally.
Yeah.
So we're moving on to the slide. Yeah, go ahead, Simone. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this is the issue with cues we were saying, weren't it, about Zoom fatigue, isn't it? It's if we were in a room, you'd, I think that element of, who will work from home in the future. You see companies like Twitter that are giving employees £1,000 to go and work from home. And that seems like a grand gesture. When you compare that to the real estate costs of central London, you could be looking at up to £10,000 per seat in an office for somebody. So, giving them £1,000 to set up a proper environment in their homes that they can work in is a small cost to pay. But, the people that haven't got the spare space in the rooms, I guess the worst thing that I've seen throughout this lockdown is somebody actually working, sat on a toilet with a table in front of them at the toilet because it was the most appropriate place for them to sit. And I think, my normal isn't your normal, it's not anybody else's normal. And I think this is where we really have to start digging deeper with people and really understanding on an individual basis.
Mm-hmm. Kirsty, if I can bring you in there, in terms of the 7 key steps, it'd be great. I've left it on this slide deck for the audience to review before I brought you in. So thank you, Simone, for that. but I'm aware of time as well. I'm keen to get to Q&As and encourage the audience to send in Q&As. We're almost there, folks, so don't worry. But Kirsty, it'd be great maybe a whistle-stop tour, appreciate time, of these 7 key steps, and really for the audience to have a think about, actually, are they doing this, and actually is it something they should be maintaining longer term? So it'd be great just a little bit of a whistle-stop tour through these 7 steps.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Simone as well. I think she's absolutely right. We need to consider everyone's individuality and the situation that they find themselves in. I've noticed in the last couple of weeks when I'm doing remote assessments that some people don't want to come onto video with me for me to have a look at their work setup because they're embarrassed of where they're working from. They're embarrassed of the situation they're in, you know. Me personally, I'm at home with mom and dad right now because I'm saving for a deposit for a house. I personally am not embarrassed by that, but some people will be because they feel they should be in a different part of their life. And it may be their own home by this point. So I think we do have to be mindful of people's individual scenarios and mindsets and where they think they need to be in their life and where they really should be as well. Coming back to the 7 key steps, this is a guidance that I was part of creating with the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics, and we were able to bring together researchers, scientists, psychologists, ergonomists, and other institutes, so the Institute of Design and Psychology and various universities in the UK, to provide this guidance that was what I hope to be a very clear and vibrant guidance that can really take you through a step-by-step process of supporting people back to the workplace, but also how we can look to that whilst people are still working from home. So, you know, of course, establishing a good response team, making sure HR, occupational health, ergonomists, human factors specialists, psychologists, and actually a group of the staff are part of that conversation of creating that new program as we return to the workplace. Obviously, conducting assessments and risk controls beforehand. And really what's important is that behavioural change. So making sure that, you know, just putting in physical measures and signage and cleaning facilities is really not good enough. And we have to get some behavioural training going as well and make sure that staff are feeling comfortable and safe. And I'm sure Annie can in fact probably speak around the behavioural side of things as well, because it's really, really important, and we sometimes forget about that when it comes to the workplace.
No, that's really important. Go on, who's going to go in there, Annie or Simone? Who's first?
Well, I was just going to say, you know, from a behavioural perspective, you know, just keep it really simple. You know, get a good night's sleep for sure. And if you haven't already, read Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep. Conscious of time once again, but, you know, get yourself as early to bed as possible. You know, at 10 o'clock for maybe a 6 o'clock wake up. Devices, you know, Kirsty was saying that she was on a device till midnight. Try not to make a habit of that. It really does affect your sleep. Turn that off. Sleep absolutely tops the charts for mental health, physical health. You know, every which way. I could give you lots of tips, and perhaps will in the Q&A. But sleep is absolutely vital as a behavioural habit.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And go ahead, Simone. Bearing in mind time, I'm aware the audience are keen to get to the Q&A, but from your perspective, the last point in respect to that 7 steps.
Yeah. I think, and it was on the Q&A, to be honest. I've seen some of the questions coming in, and it's all around the legislation. I think it's important to say that, you know, the DSE legislation was formed in 1992. Now, to give you some context, I was 4. Now, the world has moved on considerably since then. And I think it's really key now that we don't necessarily focus on the legislation, but actually look at what is right for people. What is the right thing to do here? Because the legislation is very out of date, and I hope, you know, this new, I guess, world of work may prompt updates to that legislation. But I think ultimately we do need to take a more holistic view to it as well, around not just focusing on what the rules say, that actually what is the right thing to do. And I think on that note, you know, this collecting the voice of the people, it goes back to that right thing to do. by giving people that voice of what are your current challenges right now. So, and it could be whether, you know, I've been running these surveys and this kind of consultancy with people that are working from home. They might be working in an office still. I've even done it with some people that are working in hospitals. So this kind of getting that really deeper understanding of where people's challenges are from a people point of view, from a well-being point of view, but the technology, what is kind of causing them potentially any stress, what is making their day inefficient, where are they really struggling. And I think by collecting that data on the individual level, it allows the company to just kind of get that really clear trend of where they need to implement change first. And I think that's the crucial thing, is we don't want to be, you know, companies shouldn't be just doing knee-jerk reactions here. It's got to be more holistic, and it's got to be more forward-thinking than that. And I think this is, you know, hopefully, if anybody's interested in talking more around that voice of the people, then I'd welcome that conversation, because I think this bit is the really crucial bit. Yes, I mean, Annie, you were going to say something?
Yeah, can I just add a quick point to what you were saying, Simone? I mean, the legislation, regulations, etc., is one thing. It's a bit of it's a tick box. You have to do it. But brand asset value is critical to companies. So if your people, if your employees are not happy and are saying unpleasant things about you on Glassdoor, etc., that is going to affect you massively. You know, you'll take a shares drop, you know, you'll lose people, you'll find it hard to recruit. And that's the holistic side of it, the culture, the leadership. And that's not really covered, obviously, in legislation aspects. Thanks, Simone, for bringing that up.
Yeah, thanks.
So, Simone, moving on, I guess we've got some points there about RICO, and I think then we could move into the Q&A session to have a bit of a rapid fire from questions from our audience, and appreciate Kirsty's answered some of them through the chat. So thank you, Kirsty, whilst doing that, multitasking. So Simone, over to you just to go through some of the summary slides here we see on the screen.
I mean, I guess the summary is, you know, we could have sat here for 6 hours and done a webinar on well-being and still not touched the surface. This is hopefully just being a little bit of an insight into, I guess, many of the challenges that employees are experiencing, but also employers. And I think, you know, the crucial takeaway here is get to know your people on that individual level and empower them to take responsibility for their own well-being and their own working day. I think that's the crucial thing here is, you know, what if that's the only thing that you can take away from the last hour, and thank you very much for your time, everybody, but it is that get to know your people, ask the question. If you don't ask, you'll never find out. And on to that, let's head for the Q&A.
So as I say, we've had questions through, and I just want to say a massive thank you to Kirsty as she's answered some of them. So keeping our audience happy, it's always good. So Barbara and Joanna, hopefully you've got some of your answers there. Got an interesting question here, and I guess about it's personal to everyone. We talk about this inner strength, and strength can be seen as a good thing and bad, good and bad to a degree. But is there any tips about improving your inner strength? And I think sometimes this is the point about how we get acceptance on certain things. So I guess, is there any points there from anyone are there any tips about how we maintain our inner strength? Probably should be the question, rather than how do we improve, because I think all inner strength is different because we're all different personalities. So anyone want to jump in there with a point around inner strength?
Well, if I may, you know, that I would translate that into a sense of resilience and you know, being able to feel in alignment and balance in addressing challenges that come into one's lap. And I think that goes back to it all comes back to our lifestyle habits. And for ourselves being in a decent spot. You know, if you are, and I will bring alcohol into it, if you are drinking a lot of alcohol every night, your inner strength will become depleted, because alcohol's a depressant. It accentuates paranoia and all of that sort of stuff. If you're not hydrated properly, you won't feel as energized. If you're not eating a clean diet, when I say a clean diet, you're not eating lots of processed foods, you're eating lots of fruit and vegetables, lean proteins, that sort of thing. So inner strength comes in lots of different shapes and packages depending on who you are. And I'm going to put my little phrase in here. Clean living is the new cocaine. And what's going to happen as a result of this pandemic is that the gap is going to narrow, between, society, government, and us as individuals. And that inner strength is going to come from better lifestyle habits, period. And it will be about cultivating those things. And there are so many different versions of that. And I'd be happy to help anybody offline on that. But clean living is what gives you better inner strength, healthy relationships, great sleep, good food, being amongst like minds, working for some fantastic company. And I hope that helps. And there's so much more to it, but I'm so conscious of time.
That's great. And Kirsty, I know you've put a question indeed from Jeff, so thank you for the question. I think hopefully I haven't done it as host that I've constantly interrupted you whilst talking, so apologies. But the etiquette on virtual calls, I think we're using a platform today and various other platforms to keep in touch with our teams. I think that's an important point in terms of what's the etiquette on virtual calls and how we constantly on calls when people talk over each other. So I guess that's an aspect that could have an impact on obviously your well-being and your mindset. So there's a quick fix to that, but I know you answered in the chat, but I think that was an important point. I imagine a lot of our audience are facing that issue because of the technology we're using.
I think it comes down to, and certainly in our COVID-19 guidance through the Institute of Ergonomics, we've got a whole section on video etiquette. So please do go and take a look at that. And I can certainly forward that to Simone to send out to everybody. But it really comes down to setting an agenda. So if you are the host of that meeting or webinar, it's really your duty to set that agenda and tell people how the technology works, what they should be doing if they want to speak. What is the best protocol for that? Is it that everyone's on mute and you wave your hand frantically to get to speak? Or do you have to write in the chat if you want to make a point? Make that really clear at the beginning of the webinar. But also, I would encourage people as part of that agenda to make sure that you encourage movement and standing whilst you're on that call. I've been on so many calls and webinars where I haven't spoken for 30 minutes, but I've just sat there, and really, I could have stood up and moved around, and that I should have been doing that. So please make sure that part of the agenda is that you're encouraging standing, you're encouraging moving, and maybe give people a break. If you know it's going to be an hour-long session, give people a 2 to 3 minute break in between to give them a chance to get hydrated and move more.
I think
that's great.
Well,
and I guess, yeah, go ahead, Simone.
I think as well, obviously, using that raise the hand button that many platforms have is crucial. But I think, the person that's hosting a meeting, make sure that people are feeling included, especially if you've got potentially introverted people within your team. They might not want to butt in. They might not want to kind of come forward. It's taken me years. I'm an introvert, and it's taken me years to get to a point of going, I'm going to have to just say it, otherwise I'll not be able to get a word in, because I just wouldn't naturally do that. And I think it's having that confidence in yourself to do that, but also the person hosting, making sure that if someone hasn't spoken for 45 minutes, are they just, doing their emails in the background, or are they genuinely trying to give their opinion but don't feel like they can necessarily step forward? I think that's probably another crucial thing to take away here is just remember, again, know your people on that individual level.
Yeah, I think that's whether it's working from home or in the office. I think that's key, the people aspect of knowing how people operate and how you manage those individuals. As I said earlier, we're all different personalities, and one way for certain individuals is not going to be right for the other. I guess time permitting, and we've mentioned about an hour, and I'm sure our audience might need that break time you refer to, Kirsty. So I welcome everyone that's brought in questions today, and I'm sure questions can be sent on to our panelists to answer afterwards. And aware of time, and as already alluded to, that we could have gone on for an hour, particularly about the subject matter and how important, because it affects everyone. It's a human issue, well-being, particularly mentally and physically. But I'd rather that the audience, from the panelist point of view, will ask away within 30 seconds of what would you want the audience to have a little think about on the back of this webinar, or more importantly going forward, because as I said, we only could scratch the surface respectively on some of the issues today. So Kirsty, I started on the introduction with you last, but I would like you to kick off this time, just like a last note around exactly what our audience should be taking away from this, and some good advice today, but exactly what would you like to see going forward? So a bit of future gazing, but it'd be great to get your viewpoint. So Kirsty, if you could just wrap up for us, that'd be wonderful.
I think really I would, if you are working, you've been working for the last few days, take a look at your last few days of work and have a think about what worked that day, what didn't work, and if something didn't quite work, tweak that for today and tweak that for tomorrow and going forward. It's about understanding ourselves and how we're working too. So definitely take a look introspectively at your work environment, your work setup and the way you're working, and tweak those and make changes to them. As much as Simone and Annie have said with their tips and advice, we can't implement these guidances unless we know what's going wrong with ourselves. So definitely have a look at what's going on yourself, and then going forward, I guess really I would love people to just stay healthy and safe, and if I can help in any way, then please do let me know, and I'd love to support you.
Thank you, Kirsty. And I think there's an element of your own responsibility in that. That's some of the questions that have come through as well. So moving on, Annie, swiftly, it'd be great to have your viewpoint just to wrap up the webinar, and then I'll give the platform to Simone to close today's webinar. So Annie.
Sure. I mean, I think as an employee, which, we all are, but as an employee, keep it simple. Think about the things you can improve almost, in the blink of an eye. Hydration, are you drinking enough? Are you getting enough quality sleep? Check in with your movement and what you're eating. Those things tweaked and improved will make a big difference to how you feel and how you're able to cope and function. And if you're an employer, thinking about the good of your whole team, your brand value, etc., really think carefully about your philosophies, culture, leadership, and your end-to-end well-being proposition. Does it weave through absolutely everything and anchor back to the person? And if it doesn't, perhaps there's an opportunity there for us to support you.
Thank you, Annie and Kirsty. So just want to say a massive thank you for Rico for letting me host today's webinar, and our panelists, and I leave with Simone giving the last. So just want to say thank you to listeners in today. So Simone, if you can close the webinar with your viewpoint and obviously Q, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think my main thing here is don't sit at home thinking, I've been back to back all day and I've not had a drink and try and blame somebody else. I think, if you want to look into the drama triangle, check it out. It's really interesting. And I think, ultimately take responsibility for your own well-being and support those around you. It's not easy to keep boundaries. I can sit here and say all of this, but I know that I was still on my laptop till 11 o'clock last night. So there's not any perfect world here. You're allowed to make slip-ups, but it's the lead with best intentions and just stay, balanced as possible. And I think on that note, if you'd like to get in touch with anything, there's a few links here to obviously our website, our insights page. We've also got an interactive document around working together anywhere. Connect with us on LinkedIn, for instance. Reach out to your account managers if you're a Rico customer as well. It'd be really good to hear from you around, how not only can we potentially support you, but, what was your key takeaway from today? It'd be really interesting to hear that from you as well. So thank you, everybody, for your time. Keep safe and remember that wheel of well-being and take that forward into your rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.